a note on self-remembering. That's what we'll be discussing in this video, and it's come about because just recently I've gone back into the books that inspired me and that I studied early on in my Gurdjieff studies. Of course, I make a big deal here at the channel about In Search of the Miraculous and Beelzebub's Tales, but there's a whole canon of books that we can study to increase our knowledge and understanding and our being ultimately. And the books that I've been looking into is Maurice Nicoll's psychological commentaries on the teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, and also this one, which is very inspiring, Kenneth Walker's A Study of Gurdjieff's Teachings. And so I'll be bringing a few quotes from these a bit later in the video. But what is self-remembering, I suppose, and why should we be doing it, and why is it important to do? Now, if you read In Search of the Miraculous and The Fourth Way, Ouspensky's Fourth Way, and both of these books that I've just mentioned make a big deal of this, self-remembering is ultimately the first step to raising consciousness, to raising being, and it would involve, as I will share more clearly with the Kenneth Walker quote, constating. Normally all of our attention goes out into the world and we're completely taken away and swept up in whatever's going on in our life, whether that be a work colleague, something going on in the external world, even our thoughts and emotions we can become identified with and get swept away in. And so Maurice Nicoll is saying ultimately the first thing that is necessary is for us to have moments of self-remembering. Nicoll says that we should be trying to begin with having at least one a day. And I'd argue that, yeah, of course, one is very helpful, but it's my opinion that we should be trying to have them as frequently and often as we can whenever the energy is there. And if you begin to observe yourself and attempt to self-remember and self-observe, you'll become aware very quickly that most of the time you're not aware of yourself at all. And so Maurice Nicoll is saying that we must have a moment of self-remembering, and that would require this splitting of attention. So not only are we aware of the work colleague, the scene, whatever's going on in the external world, we have some attention going back inside of us, into our thoughts, emotions, and our body. And that way we have a moment of self-remembering. And also Nicoll talks about the inner stop. So if we have a particular issue that often causes us some nervous tension, say we're often anxious, or we react negatively to people around us, our colleagues or family members, and when we begin to feel these things building up in us and about to be vocalized and come out, we can have an inner stop. And this would mean just to, exactly what it says on the tin, to have a moment where we try and stop everything that's going on inside of us, our thoughts and emotions, to stop, in a sense, sort of count back from 10 to 1, and this will reset things and give us an opportunity for self-remembrance. So I'm just going to read a brief quote from the Kenneth Walker, A Study of Gurdjieff's Teaching, and then Maurice Nicoll gives some practical advice for each of the individual centers. So this passage is from Kenneth Walker, A Study of Gurdjieff's Teachings. Self-observation soon confirmed for me the truth of Ouspensky's statement that we did everything without our being aware of ourselves whilst we were doing it, our attention being entirely taken up with the activity so that none was left over for simultaneous consciousness of ourselves. It was only by deliberately dividing the attention and by directing a portion of it backwards onto ourselves that awareness of ourselves could be maintained. And I realized that this artificial division of attention was the gist of self-remembering and also of self-observation. When we made this division, the backward glancing part of our attention took note of our own thoughts, feelings, and movements, and became what we now call the observing eye, and what the Hindu philosopher calls the witness. And without this separation, without this witness or observing eye that's observing the processes going on within us, we're often completely identified and completely in the world, or whatever it is we're doing. We're lost, we lose ourselves, we have no awareness of ourselves, of our inner processes, and we're completely lost in the world. And I've done a video previously on the channel talking about the analogy of the horse and the cart, where the horse represent the emotions, the driver, the intellectual center, the carriage itself as the body, and the master is this witness, this observing eye, and it's always there, it's ever present. But of course, at times when we're completely identified and taken by the flow and the energy of life, we struggle to have this connection. So that would be the first thing, what Kenneth Walker is saying there, this arbitrary, this conscious dividing of attention. It doesn't happen mechanically. It has to be an energy that we bring through ourselves, through opening to this presence. Hopefully the sea influences will help us to connect more deeply with this, and I can speak about that a bit more later. But ultimately we have to bring all of the centers in line, the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving, and to turn some of our attention back on our own inner processes rather than being completely taken by life. And so now Maurice Nicoll from volume 1 of the Commentaries has some practical advice for each of the centers. For work on the intellectual center, everyone should have intellectual work of some kind. Any form of thinking that requires attention puts you into the conscious side of intellectual center, such as thinking over something you have heard and trying to recall it, reading a book that needs attention, even writing letters or doing your accounts, etc., etc. There is a saying in this work that everybody must move his brains every day. Work on the emotional center. The observation and the inner separation from all sorts of subtle depressions, apart from the more obvious negative emotions, stopping imagination, working on negative states, and using your intellectual center to remember exactly what was said, apart from what you imagined. All this is work on the emotional center. Work on the moving center. Everyone in daily life should have some form of work that requires the use of moving center. Some effort of the body is necessary and must be done willingly. If you do a thing willingly, you do it from yourself, that is, you do it consciously, and everything that is done consciously is saved for you. It belongs to you. What you do unwillingly, simply because you are told to do it, is worse than useless. You have to tell yourself to do things. Again, if you do things mechanically, you get no benefit for yourself. So by way of summary of what I've said up to this point in this video, we need to have a conscious moment of awareness. It can't be done mechanically, like Maurice Nicoll is saying there in those specific passages for the different centers. It can't be done mechanically. We can't hope for life to come along and wake us up. It has to be consciously. We have to come to it by our own efforts, Gurdjieff would say, and effort sometimes is not enough. We would need super efforts in order to overcome the inertia and the entropy and momentum of life in order to have this moment of awakening. But what I was saying at the beginning, I'll just re-emphasize that at the beginning, it's enough to observe that you don't have any moments of self-remembering in the beginning by observing yourself, seeing how automatically you react and how mechanically you react to these everyday occurrences in your life. That's sometimes enough to let you know, to let you see very clearly the terror of the situation and to see that you are asleep, to observe your sleep. And then, as Maurice Nicoll says in this passage, to try and have a moment each day of self-awareness, of self-remembering. Taking some time in the morning is the most helpful for that. But at any point in the day when the energy is there, when the additional energy required for self-remembering arises, we must take hold of that and utilize it for our own benefit in order to have a moment of self-remembering. So that's what I wanted to speak about in this video. I hope that the quotes and everything I've said inspire you and give you the additional energy required to have more moments of self-remembering. Let me know in the comments your experiences with those practices and how you find your work. And ultimately, we just have to keep day by day, moment to moment, to continue to try and have this awareness of ourselves, to connect with the observing eye, the witness, and to deepen this over time and with practice. So that's all for today. Look after yourselves, take care, and I'll see you next time.